because there were people and are still people in that organization that we left that grew up in those families who didn't have a lot. Kind of their way that they remarketed everything that went on was saying, hey, the way to do this is you build your family first. Okay, don't do the mistakes. Don't do the mistakes that you did before.
Don't be a martyr.
Don't be a martyr. We would hear that. Don't be a martyr. We would hear, don't do the mistakes that happened in your family before. Keep things in order. That would be another thing they would say, keep things in order. And so we were thinking, okay, we don't want that to happen again. We do care about the ministry.
Yeah, there's kind of continue on the topic that we started on our last video regarding the financial abuse. And one of the things that a term that they used a lot in there was build the family, build the church. That was like one of the pastors there kind of came up with that phrase, and he promoted that. And he was like, if you build the family, then you build the church. Basically meaning like if you grow your own personal family, if you provide for your family to have overflow, then that overflow can go towards the church. And if everybody's doing that, then the church will just be provided for. In theory, great idea. But in practice, it was really build the church. It was, and there's not a problem with building a church. I'm not saying that. It's just that like the thing was build the church was number one. That was the first thing. It was like, no matter what happens to your family, you got to make the church has to be paid. So like they would use these terms of like, okay, if you had a doctor's bill for your wife or your child or whatever, and it needed to be paid right away, what would you do? And it like something where you obviously would do whatever you needed to in order to pay it. And they would relate that to the need of the church. Well, then you do that same thing to provide for the need. But like a lot of people are not in a financial position to pay for a $10,000 medical bill right away or a $5,000 medical bill. Usually we'll put that on credit, or we'll get billed for it and we'll pay it over time or whatever. Like if somebody can't pay something, they try to work something out, they try to pay it. But like there's a whole lot of options in that situation. But anyway, they would use that to say like, well, then if you would pay that, why wouldn't you pay for this with the church?
Mm-hmm. So the thing with that is part of it too that I remember hearing in there is that the reason why people were, people who had left prior or people who had been in the church before, the reason why they failed was because they had it out of order. Mm-hmm. They had the providing out of order. They were doing it out of their own strength. So there's also this kind of association of like, except the Lord build the house, you labor in vain. You would use that verse a lot, and they would be like, well, because the Lord wasn't really building it, then it was in vain. Or they would say, like, not that their existence was in vain, but that their work was in vain. And so, or there would be like a lot of, like, basically before in there was some families who, because they had to give all that they had, their home life was really, really bad. And so that also kind of led to, remember how we mentioned before that there was like a hierarchy where the pastors' families had less responsibility and more status, and then the families who weren't pastors' families, they were the ones that had to do the most. they're the ones that suffered the most, and they're also the ones that had that didn't have a lot of money, and they struggled to make rent payments. They struggled to get food at times, and instead of there being a recognition of, hey, this family is struggling by the leaders, there is more of like a condemnation that the husbands would even allow that to happen in their own family. And so I remember sermons basically being that use the verse of where, a person who doesn't provide for his own family is worse than an infidel. Yet they were providing a lot. They were just providing for one family, and then their families were suffering. And so because there were people, and are still people in that organization that we left, that grew up in those families who didn't have a lot, kind of their way that they remarketed everything that went on was saying, hey, the way to do this is you build your family first. Okay, don't do the mistakes. Don't do the mistakes that you did before.
Don't be a martyr.
Don't be a martyr. We would hear that. Don't be a martyr. We would hear, don't do the mistakes that happened in your family before. Keep things in order. That would be another thing they would say, keep things in order. And so we were thinking, okay, we don't want that to happen again. We do care about the ministry.
Yeah, there's as you're talking, there's just so many things that are going on in my head about remembering these things that was just so bad. It's so twisted the way that it was done. And like, one of the things you said about how, like, unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain. And that is true. That is a biblical thing. So, but they use that in basically saying that they say the Lord is going to build the house. Like, it is going to happen. He is building it. And so, like, if it's not happening, then we're laboring in vain. And so, like, there is no like, even if your heart was 100% completely following the Lord, trusting Him, praying to Him, working diligently, knowing that He's going to provide, but He didn't provide the amount that was determined by the leaders, then you're in sin and you're not walking with God. Because it wasn't just that. See, God, when He talked about in the Bible, He talks about He's not going to let His children go without food or
they would say that all the time.
That's true. That's a true statement. But the thing is that they would say, no, He's like, they could determine the amount that God was going to provide. So, like, if you didn't make X amount of dollars based on what they said they needed, and by the way, what they were saying they needed was not just to get by the basics. It was like living well.
Yeah.
And
new cars, really nice houses,
big TVs, all this stuff. It was
technology.
Like living well. So they determined that that's what God was going to provide through us. And if we didn't get that, then we weren't walking with God, that we were laboring in vain and all that stuff. So, but the thing too is that when they say build the house, and when you mentioned how they would get on the dads for not providing for their families or whatever, it's like you said, they would get on them for not doing that, but then they would still require those same dads and husbands to provide everything that they wanted and needed.
And there would be no like, and this is something that would really weigh on me whenever I was getting older in there, and I would bring it up and they would say these things. Like, I even remember very specifically, very recent memory in like June 2024, we had to go back to selling candy because that's when Jonathan said that we didn't have any more money to give. And then they basically like were like, we need money. They demanded money. We can get to that part. But we had to go back to selling candy. And I remember one person being really emotional about it and crying and
having been traumatized from doing it before and having to do it for so many years as a child.
Well, I think what it was is that she was traumatized because she had learned it that the people who had done it before her, who had already left, didn't care about it. And it was a time that she actually found enjoyment in because it was a time where we were relating. And so it was like everything that she enjoyed was all bad. And so there's that kind of conflict. But then also, as she was sharing and crying and sharing about that, the pastor emeritus said, the reason why you even had to do that in the first place was because of your parents, was because of your dad's not providing. And that I was like, okay, that's not true. But you know, you can't
you can't say that in a moment.
Say that to pastor emeritus. So I'm like, no, that's not true. And I remember feeling really conflicted in the moment because the whole thing was wrong and it should not have even been happening. And I could see like the consequence of that, and then the consequence of losing that she lost people, but then also the narrative that she's being told that's different than what actually happened. And it was a lot to handle in the moment. But the reason why our forefathers weren't successfully able to provide was because they were doing it the wrong way or they didn't do it the right way. And that is myth. It is actually because
or it was because their heart wasn't in it.
They were required to provide significant money that they were not capable of providing, which they are not supposed to. Like, and no one, like, just because some people are able to make, to run a business and to able to make more money than others. And that doesn't make them bad or good, but in there it did, because you could get by better because they were angry with you.
Because you were making the money.
Because you were making the money. So if you weren't making the money, they were angry with you. And if you're making the money, they still wanted you to keep making the money, but they were less angry with you. That's the best way to describe it.
Kind of along the lines of what you're saying, you had to basically be an entrepreneur in that church.
In order to survive.
Right, because it was very much pushed that you need to do your own thing. You don't need to work for another company or whatever. You've got to do your own thing, which I can tell you right now, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. Not everybody, like, it is difficult to run your own business.
It takes time.
And a lot of effort and everything. So basically what would happen is they would start pitting, this is what's crazy to really understand. They would start pitting your regular day job versus what you would be required to do to make money for the church, while saying, don't pit one thing against the other, do all of it. They would always say, don't pit your family against the church. Don't pit this against that. Don't pit that against this. While telling you the whole time you have to do all of this stuff for the church, which would inherently require other things to be changed and to be done. And I remember I remember them saying one time that the provision for the church should be more important than your work, your daily work, like at your 9-to-5 job or whatever. I remember them saying, like, if you need this money for the church, then you should take off from work and you go make whatever money. Even if it's difficult at your work, even if you're not really able to take off, you needed to take off or do whatever you needed to do in order to make that money. So it was very much geared towards being an entrepreneur. So for those who couldn't build their own business or didn't have a business to build or whatever, it would be 9 to 5, as little as possible with, I remember one guy, every single lunch break would spend his entire hour making 40 to 50 calls to try to get jobs for another person in the church who had a business. And then you'd have to work after work. You'd have to go sell candy or go pressure wash a house or go do whatever, paint for this company that had this painting company in the church. Like there's all these different things you had to spend all that time. So it was really came down to a very limited amount of people that actually had the resources to have the funds to be able to support the church as it was needed. And
as was demanded. Is
right,
the real is the real is the reality.
And that's the thing. That's one thing that I have never seen anywhere in the Bible, and just like such a, not even a hard time, it's just so wrong, is that like nowhere can any human being demand a certain amount of money. Like nowhere. And yet that was happening day in and day out every week. And it was from the time that when the Lord saved me in 2013, I came home from college, and I think I talked about this last time. I joined the men about a year later and started being responsible for providing for the church. And I just remember every week being, from that, I mean, literally for a decade at that point, for the past, from when I was 21 to 31 or 32 or whatever, just like every week, there's like this intense pressure of having to have the right amount of money. And it's like if somebody were to come up to you right now and just say, hey, I need $7,000 in 5 days. You've got to figure it out. And if you don't, then you're a terrible person. If you don't care about me. If you don't, then you're not walking with God. You're in sin. All of these things. Or you could have something that's going on. If you had a way of making this money and then they deemed that it wasn't working or it wasn't appropriate or it wasn't whatever, even though it was just a business, they say, no, you have to stop that and do something else. And that week, that day, you have to stop completely what you're doing and find a completely new way of making money. And within another 5, 6, 7 days, you have to make another $5,000. Completely brand new. And then for those who did start a business, you start a business and great, like you start a business, you start making money. But if anybody out there is a business owner, you do not start making a ton of money right away. It takes years to start making a good profit. And yet, like, even if you did that good work to make a business, you're not going to make a whole lot of profit right away.
And all the profits, like the whole idea of having the business isn't to just have a business and be a productive member of society. It is to literally make
money,
the provision for the church. So that means all profits are going to the church. And that is definitely something I would hound Jonathan about all the time.
And because it makes it so difficult.
Him about it. I'd be like, so literally the only reason why this exists is just for the church. But I'd be like, but we're supposed to be, and so we're supposed to be building
that's where it goes
our
back
family.
Right, yeah.
And so that is the irony, is that like, and so I would be kind of like, do they just not, like, often I would be like, do they just like not understand the way the world works? Like, I would try to kind of come up with like, because you were so positive, because you were so like, you saw them as such good people and you're optimistic. I'm like, do they not understand the world? Do they not understand math? Do they not understand business? Yeah. Like, I'm like, do they not understand that like this is not possible? Do they not understand that this is hurting us? Like,
so let me say something really quick about, you said this is not possible. And what they would use is they would say, like, with God, all things are possible.
That's what they would use?
Oh, yeah.
Because you would say.
Because the thing is, like, you couldn't ever say anything was impossible, because with God, all things are possible. Okay, so what are you going to say to that? Well, like,
that's just emotional control right there.
Oh, I know. It totally is. I'm just saying that, like, that's what would be used, though, because then what do you say to that? No, it is possible. So it's got to happen,
Yeah.
because God made it possible, we have to do it.
Yeah. So, but you mentioned, okay, so I think it's important to last video, you can watch it, go back and watch it. It's called the Candy Selling Saga. So, but this one, there was kind of a break in time. Like you sold candy, you said like off and on for 7 years. So that was pretty much like your, at least. And then at the 2024, right before we left, he went back at it. I can't even handle it. So, but something that...
Right after I lost my job.
Yeah, after you lost your job. We must tell that story. We can tell it.
Yeah.
We can tell it later. So, but something that I think is important to kind of distinguish is there was a time when they started saying that candy was bad.
It was a reproach to the church.
Yeah, even though you were still selling candy. Can you talk about that more of like kind of the rough time frame and kind of explain like...
Well, it happened off and on so many times. I don't remember what was
because
what.
If they realized that they couldn't get the money, then
they would say we go to candy.
But if they thought it was possible in another way,
right,
they didn't
then it was like candy's bad. So it's like at first it was because the young women and children were selling candy, and so they were getting all on the men for not providing, but at the same time requiring the men to provide an exorbitant amount of money on a weekly basis, which their asks were always impossible. And can God do anything? Absolutely. But that's not what was happening here. That is not the what was being required. It was a man saying, you must pay me this amount of money. And he would even change it. And like really difficult times, he'd be like, no, I need another $500 a week now. So you have to give me another $500 a week. And if you don't, then you're not, whatever. And I'm like, okay, we're not even making the minimum. Like, how are we going to make the 500? And it wasn't like, it was just like, if going back and looking at it now, in that time, I'm thinking he can just decide that. He's the pastor. He's got the biblical authority. But looking at that, I'm like, where in the Bible does it say anything like that? And it doesn't. And now it's like clear, like, wow, he was using us to get whatever he wanted. But it was because of that. So then it was like, okay, we eventually said, okay, the women and children don't have to go sell candy, but we didn't have a way of making enough money. There was no way. So we started, this was what was so crazy. I remember this week, we started doing this fundraisery type of thing all together. And it was like a Saturday. And it was actually after, I don't remember. I remember that, but it was after Thanksgiving. 2018, I believe.
This was after the fateful night.
Horrible.
The Thanksgiving night.
So we all go together, all the men, this one Saturday, and we sell this product, and we ask for donations, a product that costs like $5, and we ask for like $20 donations, and we give them the product. And we did that all day, and we made like $600-700, something like that. I mean, all the men did it. And I remember that day on our Slack or Twitter channel, whatever it was at the time, the pastor was like, amen, y'all are out there, you're talking to people, you're making the money. It was very positive, very good. We all knew we needed like $4,000 or $7,000, I think, something huge. And we didn't have it. We didn't make it, but the pastor was like praising everybody. So then the next day we're like, we don't have it. And then then the pastor was like, y'all are terrible. You don't ever come and you don't have it. He didn't say y'all are terrible. He's like, you don't ever not have it. You've got to figure out a way to have it. Like, we literally changed everything, went and did that. Everything was great. And then it's like, nope, you still got to have it. I don't care what you did, even if you're doing the right, you still got to have it. And
of course, it's all right according to his eyes.
Right. I'm just saying that was the emotional manipulation of like, oh, you're doing great. Nope, you still got to do this. And so that was one of the times when we stopped selling candy. And then a couple of years later, we ended up not having enough money. And the only way to make enough was to sell candy. And also, this was the time where we had a huge bill. It was like $10,000, $11,000. And the pastor was like, everybody bring your checkbooks tonight. And he gave like half of it, everybody else gave the rest of it.
Christmas Eve 2019.
Yeah,
Christmas Eve 2019.
So he gave a lot of money because he didn't want I mean, he gave like half of that because he had it, obviously, because we'd been giving him so much money beforehand. And other people gave the other $6,000-$7,000.
But it wasn't just like y'all give if
No.
you need to. It was
If you can, you have to.
You are the like. How dare you not give this money?
But then the thing that I was going to say about that is that even after he gave that, he tried to require us to pay him back for it.
Oh wow.
He came to us and he was like, "Why do you not just try to? Why are you okay with me paying that? You should pay me back for it."
Oh, man.
I didn't. I was like, "That's not my place to do that." But so like even in him giving, he wanted it back. Even if he tried. So there was no real like giving out of that. So we sold candy for that period of time, and then again it stopped because however it stopped again, and then back in 2024. And I remember even at that point, one of the pastors was like, "This isn't a reproach anymore because we're doing this all together or whatever." And it just was like, if they wanted it to be used for their own benefit, then it was fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
well, I
it's
mean,
terrible.
that's the story of the whole organization.
Yeah.
It's that they will use anything to their own benefit, and they can deem what is good, what's not good, just depending upon how they feel, and not really upon truth or
but the whole thing
truth or anything like that.
And I even remember going back to like even the final year we were in there, and me specifically laying out to the pastor what was going on financially, debt, etc. You would think that if he really truly believed what he was saying about build the family, build the church, he would have said, don't ever do anything with debt, because you need to build yourself first, and then with whatever you have extra, you can build our family and build the church. But his whole point was really to just build them.
Obviously.
That was it.
Yeah.
I just like, I mean, I know that, but like, it's just, when you look at the actions of things that were done in there versus things that were said, they're so contradictory.
Yes.